Hi, property people. Thanks for joining us today. As always, we will be sharing ideas, experiences, problems, and solutions for property people like you. Our interviews will get you to know some of the most active professionals in the industry that have achieved some pretty impressive stuff. Hearing about their successes, failures, strategies, and insights, we really hope you enjoy. Just spent some time with Adewole. He's a senior development manager, worked for some huge entities from councils to major housing developers, working on regeneration projects. And it was really interesting to hear about his career and his step-by-step process to get to where he is today, and his view on some of the challenges and opportunities in the property development sector. Really hope you enjoy. Hi, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Property People. I am joined by Adewole Ademolake, a senior development manager, has worked for councils, major organizations, very, very interesting guy, active on social media, met through a mutual contact who's a very successful commercial agent. And I thought it'd be a really good idea to meet with Adewole and talk about property development. I mean, the size and scale of stuff that you're working on is incredibly impressive. We've had a number of conversations back and forth, certainly both property investment development aficionados. And I thought your journey, your thoughts would be good to share with all the other property people out there. So thank you for joining us today.
No, thank you. Thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
Good. So Adewole, before we jump into your career and what you do in the property sector, I always like to get a little bit of an insight into what made the person who they are today. So if I was to go all the way back to your younger days, when you were at school, did you know that you wanted to be in property? Did you know you wanted to be in development?
Definitely. Yeah, I've known it because I remember when I was in, me and my friends over there, we were doing like design technology, and I said, maybe I can try and become an architect. But that was, architect is what was known at the time, but I don't think I understood the full breadth of the careers in construction. But I always thought that I could find myself in development or the built environment, but not specifically development.
So what kind of person were you at school? Were you like studious? Were you mischievous?
I'll probably say I was more mischievous than studious.
What was
Yeah,
what was your favorite subject at school?
I would say my favorite subject in school was obviously physical education was quite interesting. Maths, I think I just liked the logical elements of maths. That was it really. I think it's either PE or maths, one of the two really I was quite interested in.
And when you decided, did you decide to go to university?
I did. Yeah, I've been to. Yeah, I did a BTech in construction in college. So I went to college. I didn't do A levels. I did a BTech in construction and then university.
Okay. So in construction, and what was
Correct.
that, like construction management, or was that, I know I don't know that many people that really studied construction, but and right now I've been thinking about doing my own developments and putting my own little team together, starting small and then kind of growing it. It's in my mind anyway, but I certainly haven't studied anything to do with construction. Can you give me a little bit of insight as to what that curriculum entails, how it works, what sort of modules you study at that level?
Yeah. So at college, when I did a BTech, you will cover the full breadth of what construction and property is. So I did a bit of civil engineering. I did building surveying, what you look out for in defects. I did stuff like construction economics, how to estimate works on a refurbishment and new build. So you generally cover everything from construction technology all the way through to the softer sides like project management. So it is a very, very broad college course. But I would say that the way I see it is college, you're very wide. You go to university, you get narrower. And when you do your master's, you go even narrower. So I've covered everything from the broad construction at college Then I went to do a building surveying degree, and then I did a real estate degree, which is very focused towards property development.
And you said you did a building serve. What was that building?
I'm building surveying.
Building surveying degree. And what's
Yeah.
that specifically?
So a building surveyor is effectively is a professional whose primary focus is to identify defects, and also, so for instance, if you've got a building, it's got damp, it may have minor structural issues, it might have all forms of issues. A building surveyor will be the one to identify what the problems are and to come up with a solution to resolve those problems. So that's effectively what a building surveyor does.
So just on that, when you've got like a problem with a building and you've got massive crack in the, above the window, or, above the door or something like that, a lot of people look at those cracks and go, wow, that's, there must have been some movement. And then the property either needs to be underpinned, or it needs to have some structural engineer needs to come in. Is that correct?
So in most cases, yes, if there's any movement, and they call it subsidence, if
Yeah.
there's any subsidence or movements, you should be speaking to a structural engineer. But generally speaking, you can speak to a building surveyor. So I had someone that had a problem with their property in East London, and there was what they thought to be a major structural problem. But what I spoke to a building surveyor, and they said that you can use something called HeliFix. And HeliFix, what it does, it just fixes that property in one position, and it doesn't move, and it's insurance backed. So that's the type of stuff you get from a building surveyor. A building surveyor will have a very wide understanding of what products can help solve your problems. And some people can go and speak to a structural engineer. So in that same conversation, I spoke to a building surveyor, and I also spoke to a structural engineer. The structural engineer was recommending I do underpinning. That would have costed the person £30,000, whereas a building surveyor will say, you know what, that movement is unlikely going to move any further. You should get this HeliFix system, and then that fixes it. And that person only spent £2,000. So for something as simple as speaking to two different professionals, the building surveyor was able to establish you can resolve it for £2,000, whereas the structural engineer was saying it's going to cost 30 grand to fix it. So it's just, you just have to be mindful of who you speak to and what their roles are.
Yeah, I think that's really, really important. And the fact that you can go to two different people and get two different responses, they come from two different disciplines, but they're all kind of interconnected to a certain extent. They should be really singing from the same hymn sheet. But I'm sure if one of them spoke to the other, they would be able to share that opinion and obviously come to an agreement. But yeah, I think that's what a building surveyor can look at the bigger picture, right? A structural engineer might be able to just say, look, this is how you're going to keep the building together and make sure it doesn't go anywhere. Whereas a building surveyor can maybe take a view on it and say, well, there are a variety of different solutions, and you still got to maybe survey the property to find out whether this is a bigger problem than what it looks like, or not as big a problem as what it looks like.
No, exactly. Exactly that. And I think the key point is building pathology. So, when you follow a pathology, you will follow the path of a defect. So if you see there is a crack somewhere, you will look at, all right, what's happening outside of that crack in the external wall. Then you're looking at the roof, and then you're working through it. And that's the reason why I feel that they call building surveyors doctors of buildings, because they're very much into how everything fits together, what it should be and what it shouldn't be doing. And then they give a recommendation to get it to where it needs to be, basically.
Very good. So this is a really good. So you studied construction BTEC, then you did a building surveying degree, and then you went on to study another degree.
Yes. And more specifically, I graduated in a recession, and I'm sure various people have heard it various times, so I'm not going to go into that. But I always found that if I knew that there was a real estate degree that helps me become a development professional, I would have done that instead of my building surveying degree. But when you're young and you're not as exposed as you would like to be, you only go with what you're told. So as an example, I've got an uncle. He was a building surveyor by trade, and he said, Adewole, I think that you should become a building surveyor. But if I was a bit more aware, if we were living in a time like this, I would have been able to establish that I want to do development, and I would have done a real estate development degree. So it took me time to get very pinpoint exactly where I wanted to be, and I got there in the end.
Got it. Okay, very good. So you went and studied, and where did you study the real estate degree?
I studied it at Greenwich University.
So, having studied so much, considering you were mischievous at school, where did the drive to get into education? What where was that also coming from family?
Well, I would say yes and no. So I would say yes because obviously my mum, my father as well, all degree educated. So I would say there was an expectation that you would just crack on and get a degree. And as you know, everyone generally thinks that a person with a degree has better chances at success. I agree to a degree. Success at working, yes. But in terms of what we do in development, it doesn't equal success if you're going off to do entrepreneurial ventures. So I would say, but on the flip side, I've always found that education solves people's insecurities. So if an insecurity is not being sure of something, not being sure of information, not being sure of how to engage in a particular activity in a confident manner, that's what makes people feel insecure. But one thing I found with education is the more you know, the more confident you are because you know exactly what you're talking about. So now I would say I am confident in what I know because I've got the educational background. I've got the practical experience in seeing developments through and various developments through. So yeah, that is what I would say from my perspective. And I got 5 GCSEs at school, absolutely fine. I did okay in my BTech. I did okay in my BSc, but I got a distinction in my masters. And the reason for that is because of passion. And passion, I don't whatever anyone says, passion allows you to achieve wonderful things. And this is why I keep saying, if I had done a real estate degree, I would have got a first class. But yeah, but I got a first class doing my masters, so
Fair play,
fine.
fair play. So actually, funnily enough, recently I've been talking to a variety of different people, especially kind of close friends and family, and talking about things like passion. I'm very fortunate that I follow a passion, and I know a few other people have as well. But as I've gotten a little bit older, the word passion doesn't seem to resonate with everybody, because if you follow your passion, some people are really passionate about chilling on a beach all day with a pina colada or something, and they want to retire early. So that
Yeah.
doesn't motivate them, as what it doesn't pay them, at least it motivates them, but they can't contextualize it. So then it becomes purpose. So
Yes.
purpose gives people, like, what are you really trying to achieve? So in property development, you're trying to create a building, or you're trying to house people, or you're trying to give people a place to work and go and earn a living. That sense of purpose. Do you feel that that's more of a driver? Because you seem very motivated. You seem to be passionate about property development. Do you have a sense of purpose? Do you think of things in that kind of context?
Definitely. And there is no secret that I am a Christian. I love Jesus Christ and I love my faith. And but I do know that one thing that is very important to me is that thing around purpose. It is very, very bang on, because I've been in this construction game, whether it's through studying or working, I've been in it longer than I've been alive. No, longer than I've been out of it. So I left college, I left school at 15 or 16, and I've been working or being involved in it. So for me to keep down that path is not only a passion, but it's also a purpose. And I feel that for instance, I believe that the housing crisis that we're currently in, it can't take the same people trying to solve that problem. I think it needs to be various people with different ideas and different ways of resolving things. And I feel that if I don't try and do my part to help solve the housing crisis, my children's generation are going to be buying one bed flats for £5 million or more. So I always think that there's an element of affordability, but there's another more important point around security. I think when you think about, they say that the place that you're going to create the most memories is likely going to be under a roof somewhere. The place that you're more likely to have, like, maybe have children, raise your kids, have parties, is going to be under some form of roof. And because of that fundamental importance, I just think that it's equally important for me to be involved in that realm, because I know that building is probably one of the most important asset classes that touches human life. and that's why I want to be involved in it. And that is why I feel that when I do go off and start my own business in development, it's going to be very much trying to bring people together and try to create what they call socially connected homes. And socially connected means just making sure there's places in homes where people can interact with their neighbors. So yeah.
Absolutely. No, that sounds, and it's something that actually we've spoken about offline before. And that was one of when you mentioned that to me, that's very much how I see things. And what the beauty of real estate can do in terms of opportunity and prosperity and hope, which I think is only a positive thing. It's a human need at the end of the day. So it's really good to see that somebody with the breadth of knowledge that you have within this field, from your construction, building surveying, and real estate background now, and the people that you're about to tell us about how your career has developed from there, is just frankly brilliant. So tell us, you've now got a position as a senior development manager, but what was the next step from were you studying full-time and working part-time, or did you do all your studies and then jump into the full-time world? How did your career progress from there?
So my career progressed in a very linear way. So after university, I worked for 2 years, and then within those 2 years, I was able to, obviously, I didn't get into property initially, as it's very important to note that. So I got into renting. I worked for Enterprise Rent a Car, renting cars.
What age? What age?
21, 20,
Okay.
20. I graduated at 20 years old.
But was that
20.
just like a job that you got, and it was just a job, or that was something like, I love cars and I like renting them?
It was a job that I just needed to get because we were in a recession. I applied for various graduate schemes. I didn't get any of them. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to do this one. And it was a graduate scheme. And believe it or not, I love property and stuff, and I'm very passionate about it. And I believe it's my purpose. But the grit that you get from selling and renting cars, is unmatched anywhere. And you know what? I love it. I love, like, for instance, when we talk about direct vendor letters, and asking the same question 100 times and not allowing someone saying, like, I don't want to hear it, piss off or whatever. That resilience is very much birthed from selling and insurance and renting cars. So I graduated in recession, worked for Enterprise. 2 years later, I was able to I did my master's. But after my master's, in short, I was able to I got into property by selling shared ownership. And then I was able to, like, use that to try and segue into development, because that was always my goal. Because you know what, a lot of people think that there's only one way in. I said there's many ways in. You have to do whatever you can to get to where you want to be. And I'm not talking about anything illegal or anything illicit. I'm talking about anything within what is morally sound to get to where you want to get to. And then I was able to get into development 2012 or 13, I believe.
Okay. And I think that the market stall guy, or any kind of job that you get, which is kind of frontline, especially sales, and getting that rejection, I think it puts you in a good place mentally, especially if you want to set out on your own. I was watching a YouTube video the other day, actually, where it said, sales is the most important aspect in your life if you want to get what you want to get, whether you're at home, whether you're talking with your wife or your girlfriend or your parents or your brothers and sisters, your friends, your daughters, sons, all of them. It's like, I don't know, you follow this guy Grant Cardone? He's like, sell or be sold, basically.
Yeah, I heard of that. And you know what, you say that because I worked for Enterprise. I worked for Everything Everywhere, EE, selling mobile phones. That was the dungeon. That was the dungeon of selling. But it was amazing. I think the resilience that built up. And when I speak to people like Nathan, and he tells me about, like, like, reverse selling is going to get business. That is reverse selling. It's the opposite of selling, but it's the same motivation, the same rejection, etc. When I look at the diligence and the lengths he's willing to go to get instructions, I just think that you can only build that up by being comfortable doing sales. So those people that used to sell double glazing, if you put those people in property, they will kill it, because they're literally going out there killing what they eat. They're killing what they eat every single day. If they don't get a sale, they're not paying their bills next month. So it's I think that grit is very important that people embody, and not just sit in the office and do nothing.
No, I totally agree, and it's a very different way of life than the people that are administrators, or they are more technical people that are just carrying out processes. Very skillful, of course, and I think they all have value. But certainly on the sales front, when you're getting that rejection and that resilience that comes from it, is incredibly valuable. So you've had again a nice broad spectrum of experience here, that's taking you into the senior development manager. I mean, I've seen that you've worked for some councils, you work for some big organizations. These are corporates. These are massively well-funded entities, doing large scale projects. So could you go into a little bit of detail as to who you've worked for, what kind of projects you've been working on?
Yeah, so I've worked for my first development job was for a housing association in East London, and I was working on schemes between 1 units all the way up to 50 or 60 units. And some of them are now built, thank God. Some of them are well. Um, Obviously, people are enjoying their homes there. So I've worked on smaller schemes, and then I worked for Brent Council as well. I did that for 2 years, and I've done a few land acquisitions for them, managed some projects, which was great. Then I worked for Countryside. Now, Countryside was my penultimate experience in some ways, because it gave me a very clean edge into the commerciality of development. Because, a lot of people just think, oh, getting planning is the goal. But the goal really is to make sure that whatever's designed can be built at a price that is acceptable to the developer. And then when you're building it, you're making sure you're controlling costs throughout. And Countryside's, I would say, their approach to finances is it's so rigorous. Yeah, like, I think I have nightmares about it.
Go on, give us some detail. Give us some. What do you mean when you say rigorous? What do you mean?
So as an example, every single month you have to do what they call a financial update. And in those financial updates, there is like maybe 5 or 6 processes that you need to follow. So you do a headline appraisal, yeah, which just tells you the basics. Then you move on to like a backup appraisal, which goes into more detail. Then you're breaking down and looking at your build sales. So you're looking at when you're building and when you're selling. Then you're putting that into a cash flow, a month-to-month cash flow. And then after that month-to-month cash flow, you're then looking at your Section 106 obligations, planning obligation payments, and you're making sure. So you have to produce. There was times when I was producing 500-page or 200-page updates for each and every one of my projects. And in the projects I was working on, I've had probably 5 or 6 phases, and you have to go through that diligence on every single one of them. So
wow, super
I would
detailed.
never. Yeah, no, it's very detailed, and this is why they're successful. This is why they've existed for many years, and they'll continue to exist for many years moving forward, because they are very focused on where the money is, where it's going, and what needs to be spent. So that was a very good experience, and more importantly, I was able to see how you work on large developments, how you work on master plan developments, work with architects and the community. So that was an amazing experience. And the one thing I do like about Countryside specifically is that they are what I would class as a mid-ground between your standard private developer and like a housing association, because they have what they call a partnerships model, where they seek to partner with the public sector on parts of their projects, and they sell the other part, sell the individual units. So that whole model that they have, I think that is just the best of all worlds, because you're getting like money on the drip from the public sector, but you're also able to get good values on your private sell units. And that model, I think it was just opening up my mind to so many different possibilities when I go off and do my own stuff. And then after that, I did that for 2 years, and then moved to Be First, where I am now, and I'm managing probably just under like 1,000, maybe like 1,500 amount of units, taking things through planning, getting build costs, and the numbers that I'm working with at the moment is a lot bigger than what I was working in Countryside. We're touching anywhere between 600 million to 1 billion pounds worth of development that I'm currently either involved in or about to start on. So yeah, it's very exciting times.
Very, very interesting. And when you talk about senior development manager, what do you get in a job description of the senior development manager, or even just a development manager, really?
So in short, a development manager is a professional that manages development from inception through to completion. Now, in different organizations, the development manager will, like when I was in B First, if you were to look at like a organizational chart, it will be your development manager will sit on top of that project, and generally everyone else beneath it. So they will be responsible for the viability, for the planning, for the financials, and for the legals. It is ultimately their responsibility to instigate all of those things and make sure they happen. And then so that is what a development manager is. We are very much focused on making sure that the project is not only successful, because delivering a project doesn't mean it's going to be profitable. Our job is to make sure that you deliver a project profitably, it meets regulations, and it meets the requirements of the client. That is what we do in short.
Wow, amazing. And how big is the team that you know, as a development manager? Are you working solely on your own, or do you have other people that work with you? And like, you've obviously got all of these different people that you've got to kind of pull in together. And how is it different to a project manager?
that's the $1 million question. So so in terms, from a development manager will be responsible for the projects as we've just mentioned, but there will be various other people that have other responsibilities. So where I am at the moment, you will have a construction manager that will be responsible for what's happening on site. You will have a design manager that will be responsible for the design elements, and you will have solicitors that will be responsible for the legal stuff. But ultimately, what happens is everything always filters down into your monthly cash flows and making sure that the product is profitable. So that's what gives us the power and the leadership position, because we are effectively the budget holders of that overall project. If that project loses money within reason, it's our fault. It's no one else's fault, because we should be able to maybe give direction as to how we can get additional value, instruct valuers at the right time to revalue stuff. So in short, a development manager, we may not manage, we manage the whole project. People might have different responsibilities, but we are responsible for the whole project. Now, the key question here is the $1 million question. Yeah, the difference between a project manager and a development manager. And now I think about this a lot. Now, I would say that the difference is a development manager is focused on profitability, planning permission, legals, and everything else within a project. That is, we are effectively responsible for everything. So like whereas a project manager is focused specifically on delivering a project. So what will happen is, if you think about a project manager, if me and you are, obviously we're both property developers or about to be, or we've done it before, whatever, you go and give a project manager a project, they are going to deliver everything you told them to deliver to the T. You'll give them employees requirements, they'll crack on and do it. Whereas a development manager, we won't just take the project. We'll be thinking, how can we get additional value? Can we get additional units on there? Can we run the numbers on there? What's the monthly cash flow? Can we afford to cover these monthly cash flows? So effectively, the difference is that we are an informed client, in short. That's what a development manager is. So everything that a client will be concerned about will be our problem. Whereas a project manager in particular, I would say that they're very much just focused on delivering the project, which is just obviously just, if you need to build it, build it. That's what I would say.
That does make sense. It's very much sounds to me that the development manager takes very much a position of a developer. They are concerned about the profitability. They're concerned about the cash in and out. They're concerned about the viability of the project. In the grand scheme, the commercial element to it. Whereas a project manager is, we need to pull all these elements together to deliver the project, and almost what it costs is, you just tell me where the money's at, and I'll make sure that it's been spent to make sure we pull all these pieces together to get it get it done. You know,
Yes.
if materials are arriving on site, we'll make sure that they arrive on site, and then we'll, you know, make sure the relevant people get it, etc. But what it costs for all of that is not really our concern. That's your problem.
So, some of them will have an interest in that, but I think that development managers, like, you have to always see it as the difference between an investment banker is interested in the whole value chain of money. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas a person that is a branch manager, as an example, is interested in as much as they are involved in that
Yeah.
process. So I would say that the things that concern me as a development manager may not be the same thing that would concern a project manager, but everything a project manager does concerns me, because ultimately we need to
Yeah.
make sure the project is delivered on time, we're getting profit, it's meeting planning regulations, etc., etc.
That all makes sense. Where do you see the biggest value add as a development manager? Or, I mean, I'm going to call you, you know, as much as a developer, because that's kind of like the same. It's very much the same mindset, looking through the same set of lenses. Where is the biggest value add in property development today? Is it through planning? Is it through construction? Is it through, do you see, you know, in the industrial sector or commercial sector or residential? Where do you see the biggest value add, the biggest gains?
So the biggest gain, in my personal opinion, and it's something that everyone knows, is if you find a field somewhere and then you hold on to it for like 10 years or 15 years, and you're able to then get planning permission for it, that £1 you spent may triple by like maybe 200 or 1,000, you know. So the planning gain in some cases is where all the value is. But on the flip side, I wouldn't specifically say it's only planning gain. The other opportunity I also see is developers being able to build efficiently, you know, and to manage packages specific, and being comfortable in managing packages. Because at the moment, you can imagine, if I get a development site now and I go to speak to a builder and they said it's going to cost me, I don't know, £500,000 to build it, as an example, what will happen from that point is they've obviously added overheads, profits, prelims, and whatever, profit. And then, but if a developer was to say, you know what I want to do is I want to consider how I can break down these packages and take responsibility of the prelims, yeah, and maybe then what you're finding is it just reduces your costs. There's more risk in doing that, but I feel that if more developers can be very comfortable managing packages, yeah, I feel that that is the opportunity, especially for someone like me that understands it from all angles. But I think that the opportunity lies in being able to build, because one thing that you would know, Sam, is around half of the battle is getting planning, and then the other half is getting it built. Yeah, and I think that if you can tackle both ends carefully, I'm not saying, obviously we want to, it's called sustainable profits, and the reason I say that is it's not like I put £1 in and get 20 grand out, because obviously there's planning obligations that you need to give back to the community through affordable housing, etc. But I am saying that I think that there's a lot more value to be added if you were to focus not only on the planning gain, but also on the value that you can extract from managing developments yourself, not via a contractor, but just maybe breaking it down into ground packages, substructure, facades, roof, M&E fit out, etc. You break it into packages and manage that process yourself, which is more riskier. I think that's where the value is, in my opinion.
And yeah, I completely agree with you, especially with rising build costs right now. Making sure that you can, I mean, I think I might have mentioned it on this call earlier, where I'm looking at some projects that I want to do, and I'm thinking, if I just get a builder in or a main contractor, the cost is way too high, and I don't even know half that. How is it cost? Is it profit? Is it double counting? You know, before seeing a real detailed breakdown, it's difficult to say. So I'm thinking of literally starting to pull my own team together, and then just starting on some smaller ones, and then kind of growing from there, to make sure that I can keep a shrewd eye on where these costs are going, because obviously the costs spiraling out of control is probably one of the major reasons, or getting the costs wrong, one of the major reasons why developers go bankrupt, for the
Yeah.
most part. So you're saying is that with the development manager's position, Are you also finding this field and taking it through planning? Are you part of that whole journey as well, and saying, look, if we can't get 9 units on it, we can only get 7 units on it, this ain't a deal? Are you part of that conversation as well?
Definitely, we are very much the spirit of those conversations. So more specifically, as an example, one thing I like about my job as development manager is that we are right in the middle of everything. Yeah. So from I would say that the development managers comes alive. We are very much alive from Reba stages 0 to 3. Yeah. That is where we add our tremendous value, and then we oversee everything to make sure it happens as what we intended in Reba stage 3. So stuff like speaking to architects, structural engineers, sustainability consultants, not allowing architects to go too far in design on things that we can't change because of planning, because principles are set, and then it's difficult to
Yeah.
turn back. Like design efficiencies, that's a very important point. So for instance, a one bed is meant to be 50 square meters. If an architect comes in and says, we want to make a one bed 55 square meters, you may not get additional value if it's a PRS, if it's a rented scheme. So then the question is it efficient for us to maybe not go to 55 and to remain at 50? And those are all of the questions you get from working with a development manager. We try to make sure everything is done efficiently and to get maximum value. And that is what that's effectively our primary role as development managers.
The life cycle of a deal, from going, from having a chat with the landowner, maybe securing the option or purchasing it unconditionally, through to going through the planning process, and then getting on site, and then handing over, practical completion and handing over the keys. From your experience to date, what's the longest project that you know of that's gone through that entire process? Has it taken 2 years? Is it taking longer?
So I think it depends on the size of the project, and the willingness of the developer, because as you know, the development in its very nature is long term or
Yeah.
medium term, should I say. So it's not going to happen in a year. If you're doing 2 houses, maybe it could happen you can't get planning within a year in some cases, probably 2 years. So my thing, it depends on the scale of the project, and it also depends on the willingness of the investor. So if you've got if you've got a scheme and you think, I want to do a planning flip as an example, yeah, you may pass that on to someone else, and someone else passes it on to someone else. So that might take you 6 years to ever see a spade in the ground. So I think that from my observations, it really depends on who you're dealing with. So the likes of, I got a friend, and a friend of mine from Featherstone Homes. They do a lot of developments. So someone like him that has an interest in building schemes through not only from acquiring but also building them, that type of developer will be building just to keep their machinery going, if that makes sense. So I think it really depends on who you're dealing with, to be fair.
What's the longest though? Like, because I think you're right. If you got like a planning permission for 2 houses, it could take a year to build it out, another year, maybe 6 months to sell the two things. So 2.5 years for a smaller scheme. Do you have an idea of like what's the longest
The longest, 10
yeah,
years, I would say, because if
yeah.
I'm working on multi-phased schemes at the moment, and a developer you can't just put down £1 billion into one project, and it's never going to happen, or it can happen, but not in this case. So what you do is that they do what they call an outline permission, and then they break it into phases. They do reserve matters applications per phase, and then they do it over years. So the project I was working on in Countryside, that is a 10-year master regeneration project or master plan project. And the one I'm working on now is probably 10 to 15 years. So again, it's all scales. There's developments that can happen over maybe like 20 years, and there's like Meridian Water is likely going to be 20 years, and that's a massive scheme. So I think that the longest projects I've worked on is probably between 10 to 15 years.
It's great. That's good that you say that, because it's important. I think that some people understand that property development is, you have to have patience, you have to have persistence, you have to be able to take a long-term view. These overnight successes are very rare in the property space. It can be incredibly lucrative. You can work on incredible numbers. You can change people's lives and regenerate areas. But these are very much big picture projects where they can take 5, 10, 15, 20 years. So it's amazing that you're part of these things. I wish I could spend more time with you. I know that you've got a busy schedule ahead of you for the remaining parts of the day. But I'd like to thank you for joining us, Adewole, and I hope that we can do this again sometime when you can give us a little bit more insight as to what you're doing, what you're getting yourself, getting up to, and how things are going.
No, definitely, and thank you so much for having me, Sam. And property people, subscribe.
Good man. Thank you so much for the plug. No, that's great, man. Honestly, really, real pleasure. I'm hoping to spend a lot more time with you. I think you've got an exciting career going on, and I'm very, very keen to stay close.
No worries. Thank you. And likewise.
Have a great day, mate.
No worries. Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in today. We've got lots more super active property people coming up, so keep up to date. Click the subscribe button, hit the bell icon, leave us a comment, share us and find us across social media, and we'll see you next time.